Welcome to a panel discussion on innovation in global teams. So quite a topical thing to discuss as part of this sugar program or the event that we've got online for you tonight, this morning, this afternoon, whatever time zone it is that you are in. So my name's Christine Tong, as you can see on the screen here. I'm one of the faculty representatives of the Sugar Network. I'm on the board as well. I get the pleasure of being part of this program and working with wonderful young minds and fantastic corporate partners. But what we have today is a very experienced and diverse panel of people working in a global environment and in design-related fields, or with design-related fields. But before I actually start and introduce our wonderful panel members and get the discussion going, I would like to do a welcome to land. Now, this is something that is very uniquely Australian. So in the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country, Australia, so where I'm located and connected to you all around the globe, and the traditional custodians' connection to land, sea, and community. I pay our respect to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So a little tradition for what we do to be respectful for events here in Australia. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our wonderful panel members. First up, we have Dr. Markus Nordberg, who is Head of Resource Development of the Development and Innovation Unit at CERN in Switzerland. Now, this Development and Innovation Unit is otherwise known as Idea Square at CERN, which is an innovation platform, an innovation hub. In addition to running Idea Square, Markus also coordinates an EU-funded sensor and imaging R&D and I think the I stands for impact. You can elaborate maybe on that later, Markus. Initiative called Attract, which is about scientific and societal impact and disruptive co-innovation. So I actually look forward to hearing a bit more about that. Markus has a huge amount of experience prior to this, 12 years as resource coordinator for the Atlas project. He's a visiting senior research fellow, and this is going to test my pronunciation, at the Centrum voor Bedrijfseconomie, and also, faculty ESP, Solvay Business School, University of Brussels, member of the Academy of Management and Strategic Management Society, and we cannot forget the Association of Finnish Parliament Members and Scientists, Tutkas. So very accomplished with having both a degree in physics and business administration. So welcome Markus. We also have joining Katja Tschimmel, and apologies if the accent with names. Yes. Katja is a consultant and executive trainer, researcher, lecturer, coach and conference speaker, so extraordinarily multi-talented. So she's working both in the business world at MINDSHAKE in Portugal, and is also an academic with the Porto Business School, FEP, FEUP, Porto University, Lorea University as well. And this is drawing on her knowledge with a PhD in design and a master, or PhD in design, as well as a master's in applied creativity. So Katja researches, teaches, publishes in this field of creativity and design thinking and innovation, and has very recently authored a book, Evolution 6DT Model, which I'm sure we'll hear and benefit from some of the knowledge there, which is very useful in training and coaching innovation teams. So welcome, Katja.
Thank you.
We also have Ching, who is a Hokkien Cantonese migrant to Australia, whose passion is working in the space between design, strategy and experience, and very much in empowering communities to create meaningful change through strengthening connections. So Ching currently works at PwC's Indigenous Consulting, which is majority Australia Indigenous owned, led and staffed as a consulting firm, which is amazing. And it's aimed at creating impact in Indigenous communities by realising futures through Indigenous knowledge. In addition to this, Ching is also a leader at the Chinese Youth Society of Melbourne, teaching art and culture through lion dancing. And this is really aimed at inspiring growth through the practice and promotion of Chinese culture in Australia. I've actually been really fortunate and seen Ching perform, and it is quite amazing, the skill and the talent that is involved in these things. Unfortunately, we won't get a live show tonight, but welcome, Ching. And finally, we have Stefanie Russo, who is Head of Customer Experience Design at the National Australia Bank. She takes a design-led approach to working with stakeholders and research participants in a collaborative and empathetic setting, which is super important. Prior to joining NAB, Stefanie worked as a strategic designer at Deloitte and has also completed a PhD in design thinking, specialising in design approaches and how they can be adopted by large complex projects. So in this PhD, Stefanie also had much experience consulting with industry professionals and academics on both design research and practice, and applies this knowledge as a lecturer in master and bachelor courses across design strategy, innovation and design anthropology. So we've got quite, welcome Stefanie. So we've got quite a diverse audience and with much different experience, but much similar things drawing together in applied innovation. So let's get stuck in. Markus, I would like to invite you first to maybe share a little bit about your experiences at CERN. It's quite a large, it's an enormous scientific community and global collaboration. And I've heard you a number of times speak about this concept, cooperate to compete. I was wondering you might be able to tell us a little bit more about that.
So good evening, morning, afternoon to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Chris. And a pleasure to meet the other members of the panel. So a great opportunity for us to hopefully also continue this discussion and experiences after this panel. So to answer your question, Chris, yes, we are a bit special in that respect that we, as a community, really push for collaboration and competition. And to illustrate that, that is why I have moved the Atlas experiment from a cavern 100 meters below into my living room, much to the distaste of my wife. Here you see it just behind me. So this is 46 meters long, 23 meters wide. It weighs 7,000 tons, which is the weight of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. It would fit in the Notre Dame Cathedral just barely. Well, now it will because it's open, but that's a bad joke. This device has 15 million functional components and is capable, it's so accurate that it could actually see a snowflake hitting the Alps here in Switzerland. Or if we would use it as a telescope, which we don't, it could actually detect a grain of sand on Neptune planet. So in terms of its complexity, it is a number of components. It is at least twice, if you use that as an argument, twice as complex as a space shuttle or a moon rocket that sent 3 guys to orbit around the moon. So this type of stuff you don't buy it as an app from Apple Store. You really have to push the technology, and you have to invent technologies that do not exist. And that reason for that is that the gap between what we want to see or measure and what we can in terms of technology is so big. It's a number that has 31 zeros, so 1 and 31 zeros. So we have to go for what we would call disruptive innovation or breakthrough innovation or non-linear innovation or order of magnitude jump innovation. You can select the word you like. But my key point is that the only way we believe that one can make these huge jumps, discontinuous jumps, is to set the collaboration in such a way that it competes and it collaborates at the same time. So at any given problem, we might have 10s or 15 or 20, even maybe 100 teams consisting of few individuals who are working on the same problem. And then the best solution, selected by everybody, is the solution that everybody then goes behind. And that is the mechanism of competition and collaboration.
Thank you, Markus. And I wondered if you might be able to actually continue on and tell us a little bit more about one of the more recent projects that you've become part of, which is also an extraordinarily large-scale collaboration, 170 projects, all seed-funded to look at societal and economic impact. So the Attract project that I mentioned earlier, I was hoping you might be able to speak a little bit more about the global partnerships there.
Okay, so this is about kind of an extension of the same principle. So we, with the help of the European Commission, we are supporting 170, so 170 breakthrough ideas where scientists together with industry, in particular with small and medium-sized companies, are proposing what I call wacky ideas. I can't think of a better word for it, but it's again this same idea of order of magnitude, ideas that might work. It might well be that it won't work, but it's at least based on laws of physics, is not impossible. And they are focusing on these projects, and what we are trying to do is to build a kind of a community or innovation ecosystem. I don't quite like that word, but in Brussels you get money when you use it, to bring these different people. There are hundreds of different institutions working together, and we want to cross-connect them, because it's not only, you know, the breakthrough innovations usually happen when people link to things that people never thought about before. So there is an element of serendipity, and we want to bring this serendipity into this. And in fact, the change makers in this game, and that's our main hypothesis, are networks like yours, like Sugar, or what we have CBI, or in Aalto there's the PDP, and we all have our kind of specific brands, but it's the same thing. It's design thinking inspired approach to look at a major societal challenge and then to figure out what would be the best technology or best solution to address it. So that's why I'm actually here, because what you guys are doing is so important. It's so important. And the only message I want to say is that through projects like Attract, that we want to kind of game it up a bit to the next level. So why are we stuck with technology that we already know? Let's look at things that we might not even exist, but we know that we have to develop it, like Atlas detector behind me, exactly the same story.
Thanks, Markus. Stefanie, working in UX, there's a lot of connection there between technology and human consideration and how the two come together. I was wondering that if you might be able to talk about some of the challenges you find in UX when you start to see different cultures come together, different geographical locations. This use of technology can be quite a challenging one. We don't want it to be used in the wrong way. We want it to benefit humans and society.
Yeah, sure. Our technology that we deal with in our day-to-day is definitely far more incremental and nowhere near as disruptive as Markus's work. But nonetheless, it's still inherently complex just from, I guess, the breadth of human behavior, and in particular at the moment, which is a very pressing topic. Not also because that we've all gone, remote and we're much more reliant on digital nowadays, is the issue around accessibility and making sure that we design technical solutions and digital solutions that are accessible to all of our users and consumers. So at the moment, that's really you know, I guess due to COVID, it's kind of pushed that topic more so to the forefront than it was before. So at the moment, that's definitely one of our main focus areas and concerns, and how we actually, you know, bring that to the forefront in all aspects of our delivery chain. Because, you know, accessibility isn't something that just sits with the design. It sits across, you know, a lot of different elements up through to the delivery of our digital solutions. And that is, you know, one of the pressing topics at the moment for technology. One of the principles that we also have more broadly, which we had in general, is, you know, having digital touch points without dead ends. You know, just because you can go digital doesn't mean you should have an endpoint which doesn't end up leading you to some kind of human connection or a ability to speak to someone. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that fact. And, you know, a lot of the solutions that we see in the market are kind of like digital for digital's sake, which often, you know, are a result of cost out measures and things like that. And, you know, we forget the fact that people actually, you know, digital makes it a lot easier and sometimes more seamless, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people want to be detached from the human element. And, you know, in a lot of our research, it's definitely far from the truth.
Very good points to be bringing up and making. And I guess our definitions of community and the way that we connect has really shifted in recent times. Ching, as a design anthropologist, I was wondering if you could maybe speak about your experiences continuing your work in this sort of remote setting. So how do you manage to still connect with different communities and varied cultures in a way that is able to really understand the nuances and contextual details when we're presented with this very strange position of talking out of our living rooms?
Thanks, Christine. Thanks everyone for the invitation. Before I start, I'd also like to acknowledge country on the lands which I sit on today in Melbourne, and pay my respects to the Wurundjeri elders past, present and emerging. Very interesting question. It's, you know, how the world has transitioned into this remote way of working, you know, virtually, and we're able to do so many things now, even in the lockdown process, because of technology and because of the infrastructure is there, and also because as a society and community that we are able to seamlessly transition. But I think, you know, working with remote communities, you know, the positives around context and mobility, you know, me being able to, you know, set up, go have dinner at my parents' place, and then set up and have a conference and talk to you guys is, you know, quite a positive thing, that, you know, I can work flexibly around that. But also, you know, imagine if you're a community that doesn't have internet access, you know, or there's connectivity is an issue, but also in some of our remote communities, you know, having who lived in poverty in different socioeconomic circumstances, having data access is a big issue as well. So you know, it's a learning process around, especially in this lockdown period, where if we were to prefer face-to-face, we might present a risk going into community as well, you know, by doing face-to-face. And I think, you know, it's a learning experience for everyone. And, you know, digital literacy is something that, you know, we've become accustomed to in this new way of working, but it just takes a little bit more time. And, you know, how do we create a space for people that aren't used to working on digital technology, and make them feel more at home, and doing things like, you know, the acknowledgement of country, you know, having small little activities that really are framed from an Indigenous perspective, or from your communities that you're working with perspective, really helps to have a warm sort of framing into something that is quite unusual, I guess. You know, having, you know, to unmute your mics when you speak, you know, those types of etiquette that we all learn and we all sort of are aware of those subtle cues, yeah, it's a learning process for everyone, I think.
A lot of things that translate, not just working with customers, users, communities, but working with each other. Now, Katja, I understand there is a section in your book that looks at personal innovation, which I thought was quite interesting. I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit more about that, and whether there are some tips and tricks in the sort of attributes and skills that people might have, and in this new time of reinvention, things to be learnt there.
Okay, first, hello everybody. It's really nice to be here with you. So the question is about my new book. Perhaps I show you the title. It is in 3 languages. One is English. The title is The Creative Mind. In Portuguese, it's Criativa Mente, and in Spanish, Creativa Mente. So it is written in a dialogue with a colleague and an old friend and researcher also in creative thinking, an old friend of mine, Angelica Satiro. And the dialogue for us, we choose the dialogue for the book because the dialogue actually for us is a way, the best way for personal development, solving a lot of problems and learning with each other. So for us, actually writing this book was a learning process. And I guess also communication in global teams, which is systematic today, the dialogue is very important to learn with each other. And in this time, we have to learn a lot of things, isn't it? So what we did in this book is we divided, or we categorized creative thinking in 4 areas or categories, which is first the perception, the way we perceive things with different senses, also against stereotypes. The other category is the comparison. So when we create something new, we think in associations, normally in normal associations, but there are techniques which helps us to think in uncommon associations, working with analogies also. So that is one category. And then the other is questioning, interrogation. We have to learn to do more questions to get new perspectives about old things. And the last one is translation. Translation not of languages, but also languages, but perceptual languages. So we translate from verbal to visual, from visual to sound, to taste, etc. Actually, a lot of artists are working with this kind of thinking. So we categorized the creative thinking in these 4 areas, and then we are speaking about creative thinking and what's happening. So it's a dialogue, and in between there are, perhaps I show you just a random, let me see, a random exercise. It's a very nice personal analogy of a Spanish illustrator, Javier Royo. So what happened here in the book is that we invited 36 artists, designers, illustrators, even musicians to create either exercises or send us challenging images, which we transformed in exercises, in practical exercises. So the book is full of practical exercises in these 4 categories. These can be applied, and coming to your question, to personal problem solving, but also to problem solving or training creative thinking in organizations, in education, and also in social transformation, which for us is also a very important subject at the moment. Yeah, I don't know if you want, perhaps I can show you a kind of exercise to make it a bit practical. I showed you this image of Javier Royo. So actually what we are doing now with teams also, as we are working remotely, is trying to bring some of these exercises to online sessions, because for me, one of the biggest problems at the moment is the motivation. People are really a bit, a bit tired of being, of switching from one online meeting to another. Actually, a writer I really love a lot is Yuval Harari. He mentioned, I have here a quote from him in Financial Times, and he speak about zombies, which are the zombies in you. So that's our new reality, isn't it? We actually, we think we are all together in a global way, but actually I'm sitting alone here in my office. So it's this kind of ambiguity. We feel connected, but when we put it off, then suddenly I'm alone here. So to motivate people, what we are trying in our online session is to bring objects and physical 3D objects to make it more human, more real. So one of the exercises actually is this. So we say, make quickly a draw of this. You have then 2 minutes to transform this either in the way you feel at the moment, so make it a kind of metaphor, or what do you want to change in you, or it depends of the tasks. I did in one meeting this. That's me struggling in a life of in between 3 languages, because I'm German, living in Portugal, publishing also in Spanish, speaking English, so it's a chaos, my mind. And then we can also transform this for companies. For example, the other day we worked with an agency who needs to reinvent themselves in these times because they lost a lot of clients, so they are trying to find a new identity for them. So we adapted this exercise and I showed them this, and then I asked them, can you transform this first, how you see your company at the moment in a symbolic way, and then later in the process, how you would like to see it. So we try to work with different ways to make the meetings a bit more real and physical. I don't know if I have answered everything which you want to hear.
No, I think that's amazing and very practical to look at that, and it's a real challenge. Like, how do you keep people motivated in teams and being able to perform and think creatively? Stefanie, you are heading creative teams. What's your experience here? And I guess it can be really hard to manage that tension of different perspectives, too different, and maybe you're starting to really clash to the same. Where are you getting these new sort of sparks?
Yeah. We've done similar things to what Katja has mentioned. We've tried a whole host of different activities and exercises for our team to try and I guess it was twofold. One is to spur motivation and sort of get their creativity back up, and the other is to also even try and combine more creative meditation, because at the moment, given that everyone's also got a lot of external anxiety with what's happening with the pandemic, it does dampen a lot of their creative thinking. They can't focus. They're finding it frustrated to be inside. So we've done activities like that combine creative sketching with meditation. We've done sessions where we've brought in people's children because everyone's at home and their kids, like to Zoom bomb every so often. So we bring them into the creative process, which has been really fascinating, just to get kids to come in and join in on just coming up with ideas. And sometimes you can build off that in really novel ways. We recently did a virtual art studio where a lot of our team, even just to release stress, do a lot of creative artwork or music. And so we had a sort of a virtual art gallery where everyone came online to, showcase each other's artwork and, play a few exercises like a online version of Pictionary, I guess you could call it. So we've done a lot of activities to try and not only spur creativity and creative thinking, and also at the same time try and loosen the minds a little bit from all the stress and the anxiety that's been going on at the moment. But in terms of tension, I think if it's not the tension between trying to get your head into that creative zone amidst all those Zoom meetings and amidst all the stress, it's also tension, as you mentioned, between, creative sessions within between, I guess, our designers and the team, which for the most part, they're actually pretty good. They are fairly, they tend to build off each other in a really nice and healthy way. The tensions that we do find that tend to occur a bit more creatively or within the design context is more with our stakeholders. So we invite them into creative sessions, or invite them into more design-centric forums or critiques or playbacks. That's where the tension tends to come out, and we try to guide them a little bit more on the design process, and even bring them into the activities to help them you know, open their minds into the process of where we're thinking and the solutions that we're looking towards. So I'd say that's probably where the tension occurs for our teams, is probably less amongst each other and more with our actual stakeholders, who may be even more disconnected from the design process, because now we tend to be a bit more isolated in our creative sessions within the designers, and we're not necessarily in the room amongst our stakeholders, where normally we would be in one big room, would all be working together, and the stakeholders and our partners would be able to observe or interact or see kind of what we're creating, whereas we're now a little bit more you know, detached from each other. So we actively try and bring these people in, you know, more so into these sessions, bring them into the design you know, ideation, which now is often just turning into, let's all get onto a Zoom, play some music in the background, have some time to work through our ideas, and then just, you know, unmute and have a conversation, as opposed to maybe doing anything a little bit more formal, which we normally would have done in the past. So it's much more fluid and organic, actually, you know, kind of trying to promote design virtually. And yeah, and I guess the tension is more just trying to keep our actual partners connected to the process, so they're not so far removed from it.
Awesome, thanks. And that's a perfect segue into the question I had for Ching, to do with working with users, and what kind of, you know, skills does a design researcher need to be able to do these kind of activities, to work in global teams or to work remotely?
Thanks, Christine. It's really interesting that I think the same types of experiences that you take into the field, going to do real field research, doing observational research, you know, watching people's behaviors, you know, you bring that into the virtual space, I guess, you know, to try to pick up patterns on how people are reacting. But a lot of that is, you know, you do a lot of that more on the fly now, and you know, rather than having some time to synthesize and pivot, you're synthesizing and pivoting in the workshop, right? You know, whether it is like, you know, Katja, or around bringing some more tangible exercises in or, you know, flipping things around. Like I've been in remote workshops where, you know, it's really interesting that in this space, we can also use the power of being connected as a way to prototype and iterate. You know, using, you know, searching on images on Google and stuff like that, to then bring into as a way of having metaphors and things like that, and being able to, in terms of those skills, like a lot of it is more like happening on the fly, as opposed to in a short period of time, but leveraging what you've got in terms of connectivity and internet to try to change quickly so you can get a better outcome. But that also means that's more complexity with you and your design facilitation team, that, you know, you'll probably have a side chat and some debrief sessions to really think about how you can pivot. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting space at the moment, and the ones that I've been in on, and I'm pretty sure you guys have been on as well. It's like, you know, initially people think that it is quite challenging, but, you know, once we become more accustomed to the technology and people become more accustomed to it, we are able to sort of have an open mind on you know, where we can go, I guess.
Cool, thank you, Ching. And that also leads quite nicely into another question I had for Markus in working online. And you mentioned earlier, just, you know, disruptive innovation. And how easy do you think it is to really be radical and transformative in your innovation activities working in distributed global teams, when we've got all of these time zone challenges and you know, communicating through technology?
So the more diverse, the better. So that's a simple answer. Yes, it can be usually global teams if they are diverse and they are, of course, passionate, committed. This is what I think makes breakthrough happen. So the Atlas detector behind me in this image is actually a prototype. Everything we do is a prototype. That's why prototyping is kind of really part of our, I wouldn't say DNA, but it's the way we express our physics equations into something tangible that we can use as a telephone to call Mother Nature and see whether she picks up the phone and bothers to say whether we are right or wrong. What we have when we ask the question, she gives kind of binary answers. I fear. So that, of course, if I put it into the context of this discussion about using internet or remote tools, that is something that I don't quite know whether that works. You have to, if you build something physical, it needs to be in a physical space. So how to get to that through digital tools, but maybe we'll figure that out. But just to be clear, Christine, I think this question, if you put it in the context of doing it remotely, I think you are by far more qualified to answer this question than I am.
I'll take that compliment, Markus. I think there's many people in this forum that have got a lot of experience in working towards these things. We're just starting to come now to the end, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to ask Katja one last question about emerging practices and what some of the trends are in design thinking and working in global partnerships, what you've sort of seen and experienced there.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know really what are the trends are, but analyzing the kind of clients we had here at MINDSHAKE over the last years, they came from areas which are not traditional design-driven industries, such as pharmacy, energy agencies, waste processing organizations, or the area of construction. And they want to learn design thinking method and the culture to think more creatively and collaboratively. And now in COVID times, they know really the urgency of being innovative to survive the economic crisis. So the companies who contacted us in the last months, they want to learn design thinking more to be able to apply the method in-house to change their way of working there, but also for strategic innovation purposes. They don't want, as they wanted before, to learn to redesign their products or their existing services, but really they are worried to see how they can go further learning a new culture coming from design, as design since ever has been the motor for innovation and evolution. I don't want to stretch it anymore because I saw that the time is getting up, isn't it?
I think a range of different considerations and angles and experiences shared, from really practical tips to some of the bigger picture thinking. So thank you very much, Katja, Ching, Stefanie, Markus, for joining and sharing your perspectives on some of the considerations that are not just for, I think, innovation in global teams, but remote teams as well, which we're all finding ourselves experiencing of recent times. So thank you, and I really enjoyed the different perspectives that you brought, and I'm sure the audience also did. So thank you very much, and I think it is time to hand the stage over to live event number 2 with the MC Matteo. So thank you, and we'll see you later.
Thank you. See ya.